Thank you very much, sir, for your consoling and comforting reassurance. Please elaborate further on stress, total stress management and NAMASMARAN.
Surely, I will. And please tally all what I say with your own experience of stress so that our discussion can prove to be more fruitful. The stress is present during embryonic life, in all age groups, during sleep and even during dreams. It is present during conscious, subconscious as well as unconscious states and also during coma. Moreover, it is present in all forms of life. Thus, stress is far too deep and far more ubiquitous than what is presumed. It is as vast as life. It can be said to be the same as Maya. That is, everything that we see, know, think, feel, experience, like, dislike, love, hate, and irresistibly and irrevocably lose it in the past. Maya is a fleeting phenomenon, and hence involvement in Maya is followed by emptiness. In simple words, Maya is everything other than Nama. And now you can understand that everything other than Nama can cause stress. But it is a complicated affair because Nama and how it is the most important core, the absolute truth, is difficult to perceive without experience of Namasmaran for years together. But at least, I repeat, that in simple words, Maya or stress is everything other than Nama.
This is exactly what is extremely difficult to believe. How can I deny the existence of the harrowing reality?
I know it is difficult to believe. But actually, it should not be believed in. It is only through the persistent practice of Namasmaran, as I said just now, it is only through the persistent practice of Namasmaran that the consciousness is raised to a level from where the fleeting nature of harrowing reality becomes evident.
I never imagined earlier that stress could be so vast. No wonder I am getting drowned in this ocean of stress. Can you briefly explain stress as well as total stress management in nutshell, if that may help me with some analogies to make it simpler?
Yes, I will do that. I will briefly explain all this with some analogies, as that will help you. And it will help you in sense that you can step by step overcome your stress. First analogy that I would like to give is of a horse. Stress is like a horse, but it would never leave us at any cost. A horse that will never leave us, right? So there is no lasting escape from this horse. There are only few options. One is getting dragged after it. Second is getting bitten or beaten by it. Third, we carry it on our head. And fourth, beating or killing the horse. Now fifth is learning to ride the horse with delight. Now, in short, the last option is the same as total stress management.
Can we give the analogy of a river? Because Maya is compared to river.
Yes, Maya is called a Bhavanadi, that is a river. Stress also is like a river. But in stress, in this river, we are actually born. There are only two options now. Either to get drowned or to learn to swim and reach the bank. Learning to swim to the bank is total stress management. Analogy of traffic jam also can be given. It also can help. It is not an exact analogy, but helps in understanding stress and total stress management. And this understanding also is useful in reducing stress. Now, the stressors are like excess number of vehicles. Is that clear? So, stressors are like excess number of vehicles. The individual under stress is like a square where signals or traffic police are not working. The signs and symptoms of stress are like the excess of crowding, anxiety due to inability to reach destinations, quarrels among the drivers, excessive blowing of horns, chemical pollution, and so on. The pathology is inability of the vehicles to move and reach their destinations. The relaxation techniques prevalent today are like arbitrary and isolated efforts to calm down the drivers and prohibit the blowing of horns. The relaxation techniques therefore can bring about temporary peace, temporary symptomatic relief, but cannot help the vehicles to reach their destinations. That means cannot effectively remove the pathological changes and handle the stressors effectively. Stressors means the causes of stress. Total stress management, now understand this. Total stress management is re-establishing the functioning of the signals and reinstituting the traffic police. So imagine that we are like a square where there are signals which are not functioning, there are police which are absent, and all this traffic jam has taken place. Now, just asking them not to blow the horns is like the palliative relaxation techniques, whereas re-establishing the signals and police and allowing the traffic to move properly is the total stress management. So please understand that total stress management is like re-establishing and functioning of the signals and reinstituting the traffic police. That is our perception, so that the crowding jam, the homeostatic disturbance or affect, blowing of horns and quarrels, they are like symptoms and signs, and the reaching of the destination, that is handling the stressors and rectification of the pathological changes, all are made possible. So whenever we talk about the signals and police, it is like our perception, because they are the ones which perceive the stresses. Then second, as I said, homeostatic disturbance means actual crowding that has taken place is like homeostatic disturbance. This you will understand subsequently. And as regards the blowing of horns and noise that is made there, pollution that has taken place, these are the symptoms. Now, when we clear all this and allow the vehicles to move to their destinations, it is a perfect or total stress management.
Now, I seem to have got some idea about stress and total stress management. How would you define stress physiologically?
Stress is an interaction between the true self of an individual and the environment inside and outside of the body. The effects of stress means variable acute or chronic changes in the internal as well as external environment of the body. The normal stress, such as moderate exercise, is useful. But when we talk of stress, we actually mean harmful stress or distress, which causes adverse effects on almost every cell of the body, making life miserable in several ways.
What is this internal environment of the body?
The body cells contain fluid within them, and they themselves are present in a fluid medium. Generally, the fluid by which they are surrounded is called internal environment. But recently some authorities consider the fluid which they contain also forms the internal environment of the body.
What are the characteristics of this internal environment?
The internal environment has certain concentration of hydrogen, sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride, magnesium, etc. It has certain osmolarity, temperature, viscosity also. The textbooks of physiology describe these in details, but it is not necessary to burden our memory with all the details.
What is the importance of this internal environment?
That is a good question. The importance of this internal environment is that various physical and chemical characteristics of this internal environment have to be maintained within a certain range if the body cells and hence the organism have to function in a normal, that is optimal, that is healthy way. If the characteristics undergo drastic variations, then functioning and even living becomes difficult and or painful. This should explain to you the importance of the internal environment as well as the importance of any factors which may bring about drastic changes in them.
This has crystallized the concept of stress and total stress management to some extent. But now I am curious to understand the mechanisms underlying stress, though not in details, at least grossly.
Okay. For the moment, we will keep aside the philosophical aspects of stress, such as previous birth, past life, and factors or words which are called as sanchit, prarabdha, rebirth, and so on. And also the traditional ways of managing stress. We will consider a more recent story. The mechanisms as we understand today were progressively discovered in last century by conducting experiments on animals. Hans Schele is known to be the pioneer of stress physiology. He discovered the effects of various stressful stimuli in animals and called them general adaptation syndrome. Stressors stimulate spatial cells or spatial molecules in the cells. These spatial cells are called neural receptors and the spatial molecules are called as molecular receptors. There are receptors inside and they are called as internal receptors, and on the surface of the body called as external receptors. Stimulation of these receptors brings about changes in the internal environment proportionate to the intensity, frequency, variety, complexity, and the pattern of stressors. There are four main and well-known mechanisms by which stress and its effects are produced. So let us see them one by one. The first is called as various stressors which act on the part of the brain called limbic system. Now this mechanism is related to the secretion of various chemical substances. These are called as neurotransmitters. The reason is because they transmit information from one nerve cell to another. They are secreted in small quantity in a central funnel-like part of the brain at the bottom, and it's called as hypothalamus. The hypothalamus in turn secretes hormones which are chemicals directly released in blood and are carried to the pituitary gland which is underneath the hypothalamus. The pituitary gland in turn secretes hormones which are released in the blood and reach various glands which are called target glands, but especially the adrenal gland. Adrenal cortex, a part of adrenal gland which is outer one, secretes cortisol, which when in excess is responsible for various ill effects of stress, which may be on liver, heart, immune system, and it is responsible for the worsening stress. Another way of the stress that is produced is through pineal gland. Now, pineal gland is located in the neighboring area above the hypothalamus and secretes hormones called melatonin, 5-hydroxytryptamine and norepinephrine. It is conical in shape, hence it is called as pineal. Because of stressors, the proportion, the quantity and the type of secretions can become abnormal, and this can cause several ill effects on hypothalamus, pituitary, testes, ovaries, thyroid gland, adrenal cortex, pancreas and parathyroid. It can cause disturbances of biorhythms and sleep. It reduces the resistance to cancer, infections and overall stress. Another mechanism is where the stressors can act in the form of certain changes. Another mechanism is where the stressors can be in the form of certain changes in blood or bacteria in blood or certain chemicals called as antigens in the blood and so on. All these act on the different types of white blood cells, which in turn produce several substances which cause the effects of stress. And yet another mechanism is where the stressors act on hypothalamus. But in this case, the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus can directly enter the blood and produce the effects of stress by direct action on various tissues. The details of all this are given in my book titled Understanding and Management of Stress, available on internet for free download. You can always take a look at that.
I understood these mechanisms to some extent, not completely, but from what I gathered, these mechanisms are wide-ranging. For triggering such wide-ranging mechanisms to come in operation, the causes or the dimension of stress must also be wide-ranging, are they?
Yes, of course, they are. Let us consider these stressors starting from non-living beings to human beings.
Why do we consider the non-living?
Yes, that is a good question. The holistic perspective comprehends living, that is chara, and non-living, achara, to be in continuity. From a very basic understanding point of view, we can say that the stressors and stress are present in non-living things. The stress of mechanical nature, not biological, is present in non-living things. When force is applied to an object, there is a definite internal change and displacement in the object. This force is akin to stressor in case of living beings. The internal change is akin to homeostatic change, that is change in the internal environment in case of living beings, and the displacement of an object is akin to stress response in case of living beings. It is obvious that if an object is subjected to force which it cannot sustain, then there may be a damage. This damage is akin to an abnormal change in the internal environment and the effects of stress. The excessive displacement is analogous to disease in a living being. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Good. So next to the living beings, next to the non-living things, we can see that there are stressors and stress in unicellular animals. The stressors here are in the form of exaggerated physical, chemical and biological changes in the environment inside and outside. The stressors, homeostatic disturbances and the stress responses of the animals are relatively more complex as compared to those in non-living things and are less stereotypical, though still fairly predictable. Followed by unicellular, we come to multicellular, that is many cells coming together to form an organism or an animal. So we will come to the animals which are called as multicellular animals. They are higher in the evolutionary scale. In these animals, there is development of central nervous system, autonomic nervous system and endocrine system. This leads to a perceptible increase in the level of consciousness. Thus, they become conscious of the sensations, for example, visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, pain, temperature, itching, gravity, acceleration, etc. Moreover, they possess instincts. Hence, these animals suffer if they are deprived of their instincts. I can call such deprivation as instinctual stressor. The foremost instinct is that of survival. Fear of predator produces stress and is evident when a cat faces a dog. If an animal is confined to a cage, preventing their locomotion altogether, or is exposed to abnormally rapid movement, then the stress is produced and this damages the different body systems if it is deprived of particular environment to which it is accustomed. If an animal is confined to a cage, preventing the locomotion altogether, or is exposed to abnormally rapid movement, then also the stress is produced, which damages the body systems. Now this is called as either hypokinetic stress or hyperkinetic stress. Now if the animal is deprived of a particular environment to which it is accustomed, then it is called as stress that is related to habitat. Now changing this environment causes stress. It is deprived of food. So if the animal is deprived of food or there is a change in the type of timing of food, then also stress is produced. If there is change in the source and timing of water, as in case of animals in a zoo, or altogether unavailability of water, it produces stress. Now another thing is the reproductive system, which is related to parental care and reproduction and herd formation. These are also parts of instincts. So abstinence from sex, herd and separation from newborn offspring also cause stress.
Sir, will you explain, apart from satisfying my curiosity, this account of stress will be useful to me also, isn't it?
Yes, in us, physical, chemical, biological and instinctual stressors are present. And in fact, they become more in severity and complexity as all these stressors cause and aggravate emotional and intellectual stress. Moreover, there are emotional, that is, the stressors related to our feelings, and intellectual related to our thinking, which are stressors in their own right. Thus, in us, the human beings, there is excessive stimulation of the receptors for vision, smell, taste, hearing, touch, pressure, vibrations and pain. This is due to reading, dirty smells, lack of sunlight, enclosure in air-conditioned spaces, commuting, crowding, vibrations, loudspeakers, glittering and flickering lights, strange and rapidly mixing frames with aggressive and loud advertising on TV, electrical or electrostatic strong fields, radiations due to various articles containing radioactive materials or computers and color TV screens, exhausts of vehicles, mills, factories, excreta, lack of open space, lack of fresh air, lack of breeze, new cancer promoting chemicals, infectious microorganisms, parasites and vectors. So all these cause stress which may be called as related to sensations, or you may call it sensory stress. Apart from this, in us, the human beings, similar to the animals, there are instinctual stressors. The instinctual stressors are multiplied in human beings because of overexposure to glorified display of brazen and crude sexuality, indiscriminate violence, perverted eating and drinking, perverted struggles, conspiracies, manipulations for material success, perverted parental behavior, petty selfish achievements, etc., causing undue stress on instincts. Child in creche, KG schools, boarding schools, etc., develops insecurity because of lack of parental care, lack of enough privacy due to small houses and crowding disturbs sexual life and causes stress. Similarly, inability to breastfeed causes stress on the parental instincts of mothers. Violence in the form of murders, mass killings, hijacking, terrorism, insurgency, wars, etc. has brought stress on survival instincts in cities as well as in the villages. The instinctual stressors contribute to emotional stress.
This is really a revelation. We used to consider stress very superficially.
Yes, that is true. Now, apart from these sensory and instinctual stressors, which contribute to the emotional stressors, there are separate emotional stressors which come into play because of further development of nervous system in us. This development makes us stronger in one sense, but vulnerable because of sensitivity in another sense. Thus, this source of emotional stress can be our body because of pain, disease, poor self-image due to obesity, dwarfism, disfigurement, handicap, aging, etc. They start troubling more because of reduction in sources of solace. Now, the emotional stress can be because of our family, due to aging, disease, disablement, handicap, addiction, death, discord, harassment, loneliness, unwantedness, and so on amongst family members, individualistic thinking, undue craze for quick money, social status, popularity, glamour and glitter, political power, and the resultant behavior tear apart the human bonds amongst the family members. Disease, disablement, handicap, addiction, death of a member of a family, or discord amongst the family members, loneliness, unwantedness, etc. become much more unmanageable because of lack of, or rather inadequacy of, the manpower and lack of social cohesiveness.
But sir, what about the society?
Yes, that is a very good question. The emotional stressors can also be because of the society. Due to social discrimination, oppression, lack of justice, inequality, caste discrimination, we get emotional stress. Lack of severe reduction in social cohesiveness, which characterizes the rural life. Increasing social evils such as cheating, adulteration, excessive pace of life, commuting, and the problems therein also produce and aggravate emotional stress. It could be our culture due to coercive cultural rules, regulations, customs, traditions and conventions, or alienation of the culture, social norms and social conventions, we get stress. It can be occupational due to harassment by employer or a landlord, odd or protracted hours of work, lack of job satisfaction, lack of appreciation of work, lack of recognition, bad working conditions such as lack of light, lack of fresh air, or excessive pollution, or excessive responsibilities without commensurate powers, or inappropriate and over-demanding deadlines also produce stress. Moreover, lack of accountability, prevalence of discrimination, nepotism, harassment by the superiors, odd or protracted hours of work, lack of job satisfaction, lack of appreciation, lack of recognition, bad working environment such as lack of light, lack of fresh air, lack of promotions, excessive responsibilities without commensurate powers, inappropriate and over-demanding deadlines, lack of accountability, discrimination, nepotism, corruption, lack of pay revisions commensurate with the inflation, price rises, etc. can cause stress. It can also be religion because of persecution, forceful conversions, discord among different religious communities, or conflicts in sects within the same religion, religious discrimination, religious fanaticism, politicization of religion, criminalization of religion, etc. cause extreme stress in the form of religious tension and riots. The stress may originate from marriage due to harassment by spouse, dowry problems, problems of working wives and working mothers. For example, those who are working in the farms, forests, plantations such as tea plantation, coffee plantation, etc. Problems are also related to lack of issues. All the problems of marriage are multiplied due to lack of support systems, nuclear family, increased wants due to creation of artificial needs and demands, individualistic thinking, careerism and so on. Thus there is an increase in harassment by spouses, dowry problems, problems of working wives, etc. because of modernization of the society. So marital problems multiply due to suspicion by jealous husbands, lack of protection to women and girls when working hours are odd, gender discrimination at working places, etc. The root of stress may be money also. Thus, due to increasing prices, lack of housing, inadequate water supply, inadequate electricity, increasing discrepancy between needs, wants, due to artificially created demands and availability and the exploitation and the cheating, taxation, robbery, business and all these problems can cause stress. Especially when we say business, it is business failure, sudden loss in business. Of course this you can understand. The stress may result from environment due to changing ecosystems, decreasing greenery, expanding asphalt, basalt, cement, granite and concrete jungles.
Sir, what about the information explosion I am sure it also produces stress.
Yes, it does. When the ill effects of stress result primarily from our thoughts or our thought process, then we call them intellectual stressors. So you can understand that sensory stressors, instinctual stressors, emotional stressors, and on top of it there are intellectual stressors. However, our thought process is adversely influenced by physical, chemical, biological, instinctual and emotional stressors, as well as the intellectual stress can produce physical symptoms, instinctual symptoms and emotional symptoms. Thus, when information explosion leading to confusion, indecisiveness, value crisis are responsible for stress, then we call it intellectual stress. In addition, failures, inability to pursue a particular career, etc. become worse due to peer pressure. In fact, there is a kind of neurotic obsession about academic success. This drains the academically not so good children of their confidence and makes them feel lowly. This is really unhealthy. Even if one or more of these factors are not actually present, there can be fear, many times artificially created by media and advertising of these, and it can be far more stressful in urban competitive environment. High-tech lifestyle, one-upmanship act as stressors. Knowledge of diseases increases the fear and apprehension about diseases such as acquired immune deficiency syndrome, that is AIDS, cancer, diabetes, etc.
Then what about the stress of freedom fighters?
Yes, that is yet another and very important point. In addition to all the variety of stressors, socially concerned sensitive individuals have to face extraordinary circumstances which act as additional stressors such as jail, underground stay, defamation, political harassment and so on. An individual who dedicates his life or her life for a social cause such as national freedom, education of women, annihilation of exploitation in various forms, and in short, problems of millions. Now he is also stressed along with his and her family. It is essential for us to appreciate this nature of stress, as you have pointed out, and overcome our hysterical and petulant, carping, nagging and grumbling nature, and enable us to help these individuals in helping themselves and the society.
So many stressors.
Yes, that is why we need holistic solutions to manage the stress arising from unending stresses.
But are the stressors always dangerous?
That is a very good question actually. No. The stressors are not always dangerous. The environment neither remains unchanged nor does it change within a given restricted range. So the living beings are equipped to overcome and even get benefited from what we call as stressors. This is why physical exercise, emotional excitement, intellectual work, etc. are often beneficial, but they have to be moderate or optimum. Sometimes this beneficial stress is referred to as eustress. This EU means it is a good stress. It is used as a prefix. When the stressors increase in number, frequency, duration, intensity or complexity, beyond a capacity of an organism, that is an individual, then the internal environment undergoes greater change that cannot be tolerated, and then it produces distress with greater variation and with greater speed. This results in adverse effects on the body and all body cells. Now that can be with or without clinical signs and symptoms. This is what is happening today, as we have seen earlier.
Can we call the ill effects of stress prarabdha?
See, when we seem to understand, although superficially, the causes, we call them pathophysiology of stress. When we fail to understand the root causes of the pathophysiology, we term it prarabdha.
But I have reasonably understood the nature of stress and its causes. But why it is me who is suffering from stress?
No. As I said earlier, you are not the only one. Stress is actually ubiquitous. It is the darker side of life. It is the darker side of life, and the brighter side is total stress management. Hence, every one of us, not you alone, although to a variable extent, suffers from stress. It may be conscious or subconscious. Some fortunate realize it. So you are a fortunate person to realize it earlier, and you are fortunate as compared to those who are destined to realize it much later.
But I was never aware of the ghastly nature of this menace. Why is this so?
Well, this is because, as you can appreciate, stress is usually a slow process. It acts like slow poisoning and hence goes unnoticed until it acquires serious dimensions. When noticed, we attribute it to more apparent entities. For example, infection. Now infection itself can be a result of stress. You can understand this if you appreciate the fact that we see the dust particles moving in the dust storm, but fail to notice the wind which actually moves the dust particles. Moreover, even if we identify stress, we don't have proper understanding of it, just as we don't understand democracy, socialism, secularism, God, dharma, and so on and so forth. Besides, we are habituated to put up a brave face even when we are suffering because of shyness and apprehensions of being insulted, humiliated, ridiculed, pitied, sympathized, or even exploited. Other more obvious reasons are, of course, illiteracy, poverty, lack of time, lack of information, lack of dialogue, lack of communication, lack of curiosity, and of course, apathy, and so on.
In view of this wide range of the mechanisms, cause and the incident of stress, the extent of medical ailments and general suffering due to the stress must also be enormous, isn't it?
Yes, the suffering is also enormous. And the effects of stress are numerous. But the most important damage common to all varieties of sufferings is forgetfulness about the true self. In my view, this is dehumanization. This is true dying. This is true dying, the true death before physical death. The stress actually harms every aspect of our life. Now, if you want to know the different effects, let us categorize them. Let us categorize them and understand. Now, stress harms our mind. So there is tension, anxiety, worry, fear, despair, helplessness, dejection, irritability, restlessness, apathy, suffocation, lack of confidence, listlessness, depression, self-pity, sadness, frustration, unpleasant dreams, disturbance of sleep, suicidal tendencies, abnormal and excessive fear of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. In addition, undesirable habits such as nail biting, habit of moving a leg or hands unconsciously, and so on. The stress can harm our family. Thus, there is a lack of warmth, dialogue, mutual respect, love, indifference towards one another, petty quarrels, bitterness, violence, impatience, intolerance, lack of harmony, lack of cleanliness, and so on. Stress reduces our performance. So we develop inefficiency, absenteeism, indifference, irresponsibility, and carelessness towards our duty. We also have lack of discipline and we are unbothered about it. In addition, our intelligence also suffers. Thus we develop forgetfulness, confusion, indecision, difficulty in problem solving, lack of imagination, difficulty in learning, and so on. Stress deteriorates our social behavior also. So we have pettiness, dishonesty, lawlessness, lack of punctuality, unreliability, deception, corruption, crime, and our matrimonial relations leading to discord, separation, divorce, and so on. Stress adversely affects our body. Thus it harms our sexuality, immune system, which is associated with body resistance, and it harms our sexuality and also immune system. Now this immune system is associated with body resistance to infections as well as diseases such as cancer, AIDS, etc. The stress affects our eyes and vision, ears and hearing, nose and sense of smell, mouth, heart, blood vessels and organs supplied by them. In addition, the stress also damages our respiration, our muscles, our joints, our connective tissues such as tendons, ligaments, and so on. Other systems such as digestive system, genitourinary system, skin, mucous membranes, these also suffer. Our endocrine system, nervous system, they also suffer. Our body posture, our hair, all these become abnormal. So in short, it affects most of the systems of the body and most of the cells of the body. But not only that, it also affects our looks, and it is unmistakable. If you compare a photo of your childhood and recent one, then you will appreciate the stress that you have undergone.
I have noticed this.
You have?
Yes.
That's good. Hundreds of damaging effects of stress on body, instincts, mind, thoughts, memory and perspective in individual and social life are described in my as well as others' books. But according to me, like the mechanisms, causes and incidents of stress, the effects of stress also are infinite and beyond enumeration and description. The effects of stress vary in accordance with individuals' perceptions, her or his homeostatic machinery, that is homeostatic machinery, which means controlling and maintaining the internal environment in a certain range. Now, right from the time of fertilization of ovum and sperm, this homeostatic machinery is developed. It develops into several organs, tissues, which work in coordinated manner to keep the internal environment in constancy. Now, it also determines the nature, intensity, frequency, duration, and the number of stressors acting at a time and complexity of the stressors.
Do you mean to say that the extent of energy, passions, sensitivity, intelligence and perspective of an individual would determine the extent of the stress?
Yes, actually when we say stress, they will determine the extent of effects or bad effects of the stress. Because even if there is stress, if there is ability to manage it, then the effects of stress would be minimized. But besides all this, the actual physiological constitution, that is genotype and phenotype, also determine the pathophysiology and the effects of stress. All these, when not understood properly or exactly, are referred to as sanchit.
Sir, what is genotype and phenotype?
To put it in simple words, genotype is like a seed where the life is not expressed, and phenotype is like a tree which is alive, which is fully expressed.
I see. I have to handle the social, physiological and pathophysiological aspects of stress simultaneously. That is what you mean by total stress management. It includes medical treatment, exercise techniques, yoga, etc. on the one hand, and the evolution of globally beneficial policies, plans, programs, laws, rules, etc. on the other hand. Am I right, sir?
Yes, most certainly you are right. For that, we require simultaneous internalization and universalization of NAMASMARAN. Let me reiterate the most important point again. The stress, especially mismanaged, leads to forgetfulness about the true self. We can call this Nama Vismaran. This is true dying before physically dying. This is true death before physical death. As a result of stress, there is morbid perspective, morbid policies, morbid programs, morbid plans, and morbid implementation. There is morbidity in the laws, rules, traditions, conventions, and so on. All this at global level, at national level, at regional level, and at local levels, and at individual level. Now this vitiates the entire atmosphere and environment in the family, society, industries, schools, colleges, hospitals, offices, and at local, regional, national and international levels. As a result, we become caricatures of ourselves. We go berserk trying to seek happiness and fulfillment in every kind of indulgence, but all our efforts go in vain and we keep slogging in turbulent emptiness, further forgetting our true selves and vitiating the atmosphere. We become chaotic ourselves and multiply the chaos around. We become cynical and spread the same. Therefore, efforts to relax or manage stress, discipline children, and laws to bring about law and order, propaganda against corruption and scams, hue and cry against inflation, appeals for charity, spiritual sermons for individual purification and improvement or individual gratification, solace, relaxation, entertainment and other measures have limited and temporary role in an individual or social stress management. Why is this so? This is so because in absence of giving optimum attention to universal policies, programs, plans and their implementation, there is gross or inadequate or useless management of stress. That management is actually mismanagement. It is counterproductive. Why is this so? This is because there is no holistic management of stress. This is where I became increasingly convinced that in view of the mechanisms underlying the causes, the effects and the incidences of stress, what could be the panacea? Now, I realized that the panacea is NAMASMARAN. NAMASMARAN is the single, simple and easy to practice democratic solution. It is the panacea in individual and global blossoming. It is the panacea for total stress management.